My name is Jamie Powell, and this is my analysis of Hurricane Rita. I'll start off with a couple of pictures, just to give you a visual, because it's always good to start with a good idea in your head of what we're talking about. The left picture is the path Rita was projected to take. The right one's a satellite image. Here's some pictures of the damage that was caused by Rita. The events leading up to Rita. Hurricane Katrina had hit August 29th, so less than a month later when Rita hit on September 24th, everyone was already on edge. Rita hit on the eastern coast of Texas and the far southwestern coast of Louisiana, including New Orleans and Cameron Parish, and went all the way up into northern Louisiana and pushed a good wall of water about 15 to 20 miles inland in Louisiana. Groups affected, just to name a few: residents, first responders, military, families of the responders, of course people that work in the areas that were hit by the hurricane, and their families that depended on their money. The relief agencies, everyone that came to volunteer and help, the monetary donations given by people throughout the world for relief and for response businesses. The oil field was hit. I remember gas prices going up right after Katrina, and then again after Rita. And then those that received refugees, the cities that took in the people that had evacuated. San Antonio was one of them, and I worked for an EMS service. We provided the medical standby at Kelly Air Force Base for several months after this hurricane. Reports say anywhere from 118 to 130 deaths occurred. Unfortunately, about 100 of those were in the evacuation effort and not having anything to do with the actual hurricane itself. About $10 billion was lost between the cost to rebuild and the aid required to help the people that were affected. Relief money was available before landfall for like 72 hours. The long-term effects. Better facilities have replaced the damaged building in Cameron Parish. Specifically, they've got state-of-the-art schools and state-of-the-art library, and all the buildings are upgraded to withstand hurricanes now. Other businesses and residences and roads have been repaired. It's been a while. It's been 12 years. Let's see. FEMA provided $668.8 million in public assistance during this hurricane. What we learned from Hurricane Rita: more people will evacuate if they've recently had a disaster scare or a disaster that affected them. Just in Houston alone, they had 3.7 million people evacuate. There were changes and developments made in the emergency management system thanks to the evacuations and the scope of Rita.
Matt Sampson here with Hurricane Specialist Carl Parker. Carl, not a lot on the tropics horizon right now, but if we look back 8 years, Texas is getting slammed.
Yeah, that's right. A real reminder about what can happen this time of the year. This photograph was taken 8 years ago today, and it was Hurricane Rita as a Category 3 with 125-mile-per-hour wind. And everybody was really scared for good reason in southeast Texas. So there was a huge evacuation, the biggest in U.S. history. 3 million people leaving the coastline and moving up into the central part of Texas. And the result was a terrible traffic jam. There were reports of people traveling 13 miles and it took 15 hours to do that. So predictably, people ran out of gas, and when they ran out of gas, they had no air conditioning, and then suddenly in 100-degree heat, you've got heat exhaustion as a problem. And in the end, of the 120 people that were killed by Rita, 100 of them were killed by the evacuation, unfortunately.
You know, one thing I see here, this whole side of the road is empty right now.
Yeah, that was one of the big lessons about this particular evacuation. They didn't open up the inbound lanes of the freeway for outbound traffic. That's called contraflow. And they did eventually do it, but they didn't do it at first. This is September 21st. And now, of course, they're doing that. And when they had an evacuation for Hurricane Ike, it was much more efficient than it was in this case.
This storm was actually a pretty intense storm as well, wasn't it?
People had a lot of reason to be scared about this one. Just a couple of days before, when that picture of the traffic was taken, it was down to 895 millibars. That's the fourth most intense hurricane on record.
Wow. Thanks, Carl. Matt Sampson here with Hurricane Special.
Sorry about that. Emergency management activities that went on. There was a FEMA response, but it was people complained that it was slow, so they learned a lot from the response to Katrina and Rita and improved timelines and supply positioning and people positioning. And a big focus for FEMA and several other agencies was to get a faster response to disasters such as this. Contraflow was another one. I read a story how the National Guard was sent out to refuel cars that were stranded on the highways, but when they arrived, they discovered that their nozzles for refilling were for jets and not for cars. So they basically wasted gas driving out there to not help anybody. Let's see. We have learned from this that levees need to be built higher and stronger, and that evacuation processes need to be adapted so that more people can be accommodated. We've learned that contraflow is a good thing as long as it's enacted at the right times, and that restroom stops and gas supplies need to be positioned prior to evacuation. 12 years later, it's pretty much business as usual in the areas that were affected. They've had plenty of time to recover. The areas are thriving. Residents have returned. And here's my sources. Thanks for watching.